This week's constellations are Perseus, Auriga, and Gemini. These are generally thought of as winter and springtime constellations for Northern Hemisphere observers. This is a shot of the sky that contains these three constellations. There are quite a few bright stars in this part of the sky and in the constellations. The asterisms we draw for the constellation figures may not look at all like what they're supposed to represent, though. So what I usually do is just remember them in relation to recognizable patterns, and just think of the constellations as areas of the sky. Here's the asterism for Perseus, which is supposed to represent the hero of a Greek myth. The myth involves Andromeda, who's a princess, Cetus, a sea monster, Cassiopeia, and Cepheus, the queen and the king of Ethiopia, all of which are neighboring constellations, but I won't bore you with the details here. Watch Clash of the Titans to see one version of this story. Maybe this asterism looks like the figure of a man to you, if you really use your imagination. At least it has two legs. To the left of Perseus in this picture is the constellation of Auriga. The asterism for Auriga is just a five-sided box. The dashed lines here are in there because the star where those dashed lines meet actually belongs to a different constellation. Auriga is the Latin word for charioteer, but I can't for the life of me see a charioteer in this group of stars. Some of the old drawings of this constellation even show the charioteer carrying some baby goats, and the stars down here are supposed to represent the kid goats. To the left of the stars in Auriga is the constellation of Gemini, the twins. That's the only one of this week's asterisms that looks much like what it's supposed to represent. There are 5 star names to learn with this week's constellations, so let's get started on them. The first star name is Pollux, one of the twins, and the one that appears to our left when the twins are standing upright. Pollux is a star with about twice the mass of the Sun and about 9 times its diameter, and it's classified as a giant star. It's only 33.8 light years away, which is nearby for a star, and because it's so close, we've been able to measure the distance to it accurately. Pollux's twin star in Gemini is Castor, which is actually a 6-star system. To the naked eye, Castor appears to be a single star, but even a small telescope will let you see a second star near it. It turns out that both Castor and this other one have very faint companions, and then there's even a third pair of stars in the same system. Next up on our list of this week's stars is Capella, the brightest star in Auriga, and the 6th brightest star in the night sky. Its declination is high enough that for viewers at our latitude of 47 degrees, it never sets, but travels in its circle around the north celestial pole. It does get within a couple degrees of our northern horizon, and when that's the case, it may be lost in dust and haze, or it may look more like a stoplight than a star, as our atmosphere does weird things to its light. Capella is part of yet another multiple star system, although the 2 brightest stars are so close that they can't be resolved as individual stars, even with a telescope. There are another 2 stars in the system, a pair of red dwarf stars, and those red dwarfs orbit the other 2 with a period of about 400 years. The whole system of stars is about 42 light years away. On to our 2 stars in Perseus, the first of which is Murphak, another star which is always above our horizon. Murphak is more than 500 light years away, and it lies in a group of stars that are nice to look at through binoculars. Murphak has about 7 times the Sun's mass and about 31 times its diameter. It's a supergiant star, having left the main sequence, and is in its later stages of its life. Our last star for this week is Algol, commonly known as the Demon Star. In Greek mythology, Perseus beheaded the Medusa, and drawings of Perseus using the stars in the constellation have Algol represent the head of the Medusa being held in Perseus' left hand. Algol is yet another multiple star system, and one of its fainter companions' orbits lies along our line of sight to Algol. When the faint companion passes in front of Algol, the light we receive from Algol dims considerably, so that the apparent magnitude of Algol drops from its usual 2.1 down to a much dimmer 3.4. This happens every 2.87 days. Now it's time to learn some of the constellations near these in the sky. In this view, it may be hard to pick out Gemini and Auriga at first. They appear as they might shortly after rising in the northeast. Gemini appears to be lying on its side in this view, and Auriga appears above it. Just to the right of Auriga are the stars of Taurus, and you can see there's that one star where those dashed lines meet. That star actually belongs to Taurus, although just barely. The border between Auriga and Taurus is just to the left of that star. It's okay for asterisms to share stars once in a while. Below Taurus and to the right of Gemini are the stars of Orion, which you may have recognized. Finally, one last thing to identify in this view is not a constellation, but the stars of a cluster called the Pleiades, which are actually within the constellation of Taurus. Let's have a look at a different sky view. In this one, Gemini is in a more upright position in the upper left part of the picture. To the right of Gemini is Auriga, and to the right of Auriga is Perseus. Connected to Auriga by that one common star again, remember it belongs to Taurus. And to the left of Taurus in this view are most of the stars of Orion. We're missing a couple. Notice that when the Gemini twins are standing upright, Orion is beneath their feet. Can you spot the Pleiades in here? If you think of those two lines of stars in Perseus as the feet of our hero, the Pleiades are just under one of Perseus's feet. I imagine the Pleiades as a bunch of grapes being stomped on by Perseus. Now let's shift our view a little bit to the right of this picture so we can learn about a couple of deep sky objects that are in Perseus. This view is more magnified than the others have been. You might recognize Perseus there on the left side of the picture. At the top center of this picture is an asterism that you might have learned. The stars there belong to the constellation of Cassiopeia, and it's a W-shaped pattern. To the right of Perseus are the stars belonging to the constellation of Andromeda. The object we're interested in is in between Perseus and Cassiopeia, along that dashed line. This is the famous double cluster in Perseus, and it's a favorite of stargazers. Here's a picture of it. These two clusters can be seen and perceived as a sort of fuzzy star with the naked eye if you're under dark enough skies, but they look much better through a pair of binoculars. And if you look at them through a telescope under low power, you can see both clusters in the same field of view, and they're pretty spectacular. They're close enough to our north celestial pole to be above our horizon all the time, so you can see them on any clear night. They're about 7,500 light years away from us. Let's learn about one more deep sky object back in this part of the sky. This one's in between Perseus and Andromeda. and it's Messier Object 34 in the area shown here. People don't often look at this because it isn't as spectacular as the double cluster. It's about 1,500 light years away. You can also see this with the naked eye under very dark skies, but binoculars are much better, and a telescope with a moderate power eyepiece provides the best view of all. And that's it for this week's constellations.